Welcome to the Pillars of Progress podcast, brought to you by MCL Construction. I'm Travis Justice, and today we're honored to sit down with someone who's dedicated his life to keeping Nebraskans safe, Buffalo County Sheriff Neil Miller. He's been in law enforcement since he was a kid. And I mean that, a kid. And since being elected to sheriff back in 1990, he's helped transform how public safety works across rural Nebraska. From co-locating with the Kearney Police Department to leading the charge on better communication technology. He's never stopped moving things forward. And now, before he hangs up his badge, he's pushing for one last big step, a new law enforcement center for Buffalo County and the City of Kearney. This interview is about commitment, it's about change, and it's about leaving a community better than he found it. Sheriff Neil Miller, welcome to the Pillars of Progress podcast. How many podcasts as a sheriff have you been on?
You know, I've listened to a few, never done one, so this is a first for me.
Well, we'll try to make it as painless as possible.
Okay, that's
all right.
Good.
You've been sheriff since 1990?
Yes, I have.
What in the world would possess you to want to keep running for office over and over again since 1990?
You know, it's this last election was 9 elections for me, so there won't be a 10th. When this one's done, then I'll be done this 4-year term. I started with the department in 1979, so I actually had 12 years on as a deputy and chief deputy prior to being elected sheriff. May 15th was my 49th year of law enforcement, so coming up this next year will be 50 years of law enforcement for me. I figure that's probably enough for anybody. It's time to maybe move on.
So when you started almost 50 years ago, did you think you would be in law enforcement 50 years?
Hard to say. I knew what I wanted to do. I loved law enforcement. It was the only thing I ever wanted to do. I started out in the municipal police department and then went to the county level of law enforcement and then came to Buffalo County in 1979.
So where'd you grow up and what was your influence to get into to law enforcement?
You know, I went to grew up most of my school in Grand Island. When I was a junior in high school, we moved to Silver Creek, which is just west of Columbus. I got to know the law enforcement officer that was in that community. I'd known some that were in Grand Island, and I just always had that desire to be in law enforcement, to be a law enforcement officer. And so I started in the town next to us, Silver Creek in Clarks. I was 19 years old. That was my first gig as a law enforcement officer.
Can you even hire a 19-year-old anymore like that?
You know, we can't. So interesting story on that. I started at 19, and so they had to get a waiver for me to go to the training center in Grand Island Law Enforcement Training Center. One of the stories I like to tell, it just kind of humbles you a little bit as to how this profession is when I was in Clarks, the mayor's like, I said, I need a new gun. This gun's just ridiculous. I said, this thing's been around for 100 years, not a modern law enforcement weapon for 1976. So he said, that's fine. He said, go ahead and get one ordered. So went to, back then, Dub's Sporting Goods in Grand Island. Ordered the gun. They called and they said, your gun's in. I said, great. So I was all dressed up, just prim and proper with my nice uniform on, went into Dub's, asked for my ID, and the guy said, well, you can't have this gun. And I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. He goes, nope. Not only can you not have this gun, you can't buy ammunition for this gun. You have to be 21 for both. So I ended up having to call the mayor in Clarks, which is about 30 miles away, and he had to drive in, pick the gun up officially for the village of Clarks, and then I could carry it, but I couldn't buy it. And I had to look for 21-year-olds to buy ammunition. So I had ammo for that gun.
Mayor, I need ammo.
I need ammo.
Somebody go get me some ammo. How much has law enforcement changed since the late 70s to right now? Think about the shifts in law enforcement, investigation, everything. What has changed?
Everything, and then not a lot, because it comes down to people wanting to be involved in bettering their community, keep their community safe. At the same time, there's been so much change in training, in technology. The technology is just absolutely amazing from where it was in 1976 when I started to the technology that our deputies and police officers and troopers enjoy today, in the forms of communication, all these things that make it safer, so much safer for them to do their jobs. And training has greatly increased. Back when I started, they just gave you a gun and a badge and said, okay, go get them. Good luck till you get to the training center. Hope nobody kills you between now and then. And now, that it wouldn't even be thought of. We were training people, sending them to the training center before they ever hit the street. They get through the training center. After 16 weeks, they come back for another minimum of 12 to 16 weeks of field training for them, so they understand exactly what the job is in their particular location, just not a general overview of what it looks like from the training center. So we've seen a huge change in the amount of training. The state's become more involved in licensing of law enforcement. Back when I started, there were a lot of licenses issued, none of them ever revoked, and people would just hang out there with a license. Now, it's very much regulated. The state is very, very involved in the licensing of law enforcement. That's a good thing because it mandates accreditation. So now we have accreditation standards from the state, which again did not exist at that time.
So we call this the Pillars of Progress podcast. When you look back on almost 50 years and sheriff since 1990, talk about the progress you've made, especially in the world of that 911 communications and really helping not just Buffalo County out, but western Nebraska, right? And in a lot of different areas.
Exactly. Our 911 is a regional 911. And our region, which we're the host for 22 other PSAPs with the technology for 911 calls to come in and be spread out to those other 22 PSAPs in south central Nebraska and the Panhandle. And we've seen a huge change in 911. In fact, I can tell you that when I came to Buffalo County in 1979, there was one community that could dial 911, and that was Kearney. All it did was ring the phone. You answered the phone. There was no information. There was no location. There was nothing but a phone call. To where now every community in Nebraska has 911 with enhanced location technology so that we can determine where they need help at, accurately dispatch those services, those emergency services that they need, down to meters. We're down to basically a few meters most of the time on the location of the call. Back in the day, too, it was all landline. There was no wireless. There were no cell phones. And so when Enhanced 911 came, which was the first generation of improved 911, we had a database, and the call would ID the call, and then it would dip a database, and it would give us the address that phone was located at. So each phone was located by their address, but now it's changed to where we still have that information, but on top of that, with the wireless side of this and wireless devices, so much more mobile, the technology's just changed to where, we're to the place now where if you are in a crash or your airbag's deploying your car, we get notification in the 911 center that your phone has either had a hard bump or that airbags have deployed in a car. There are all these different sensors in vehicles now that ship information back to the 911 dispatchers so that they have an idea of what the appropriate response to that call is going to be. Sometimes you'll get, technology's always got a bug or two. If somebody leaves the phone on top of their car, drives off, that phone falls off. Well, we're going to get an alert that says that this phone's been in a crash. Well, it has, but the car hasn't. So there are still some limits to the technology, but overall, drastic increase.
But when I was back there touring, a lot of people back there gave you credit for the infrastructure and the idea of the way it's put together. How did you come up with that? What were you thinking when you were looking at it holistically and proactively into the future?
I've always, had I not done law enforcement, I would have done something in technology, simply because I've always had that gene, is the technology thing. And I believe that technology is a great thing, but it has to have a purpose. And the purpose for us has been to make things safer, to be more efficient on how we do our jobs, whether that was Buffalo County and the Kearney Police Department were the very first connected mobile data computers in the patrol cars in the state of Nebraska. And that came back in 1992, 1993. We had the ability to run wants, warrants, registration checks, any number of queries. Used to be you called the dispatcher, you gave them the information, they called you back over the radio, gave it back to you. This opened up a whole new way of doing business with mobile data computers in the cars and the ability for them to run their own check and see the screen as to who that car belonged to, whether or not that was a wanted person. So that was a big thing with when we first started the technology side. Obviously keeping up with all the different iterations of 911, because we've gone through a number of them since we first implemented 911 and started the 911 center here. And then communications, that was a big thing. Radio communications are the lifeline for any first responder to get back, to get additional help, to let them ask for information. For firemen working in a building that's on fire and doing interior firefighting, they have to be able to communicate. And it's evolved as well over the years. When I first started, they'd say to me, well, what was your first portable radio? I said, well, my first portable radio really was not a portable radio. It was a mobile radio that you took the microphone and wrapped it around the outside rearview mirror so that if you had to come back and call for help quick, you didn't have to get in the car to grab the microphone to call for help. We had no portables when I started. Now we're to the place where we've got radios that are intelligent, that can actually communicate on the radio network and the cellular network, give the location of the device to the dispatchers so they can see what's going on, do an emergency alert that tells them that the officer needs assistance. Those things really help with the safety and with the ability for officers to safely do their jobs, and firemen and EMS as well, because when we built the new 800 megahertz trunked radio system here, it was for everybody. Partnership with the City of Kearney, Buffalo County, but it include all public safety.
You just mentioned the partnership with the City of Kearney. In my limited understanding of law enforcement, the way things work, but I've been around a good number of years. Usually I see county cops don't get along with city cops. And you guys are so unique in the fact that you guys work together, you live together. And the more I dive into this, I'm like, the co-location in Kearney and Buffalo County might be the best example of government efficiency I've seen in a long time. And I don't think a lot of people know about it. I mean, it is government efficiency maybe at its finest.
It is. And, I give credit where credit's due. Back in the day when I was running for sheriff, I wasn't elected yet, and Steve Lampkin was the Kearney police chief. And they had an opportunity to get this building we're in. And he's like, well, it's a great opportunity, but I really think we ought to bring the sheriff's office with us. So we ended up, he approached the sheriff then who I worked for, which was Frank Deneen. And Frank said, I'm not running. Neil Miller's running. Why don't you, I'll support it, but you and Neil get together and figure this thing out. And so Steve Lampkin and Dan Lynch off the Kearney Police Department, the three of us and a lot of other people, but we just decided that let's do this co-location thing, but let's make it a little different than just being in the building together. We actually came up with, and again, I credit this back to Steve Lampkin, with these agreements that said, why do we need two records departments? Why do we need two communication centers? Why do we need two evidence systems? Why do we need two record systems? Why do we need two IT systems? How about if one of us does it and shares it with the other one, and we reduce the support side of this as much as we can and make that as efficient as we can? And not only does it make it more efficient, but it increases the amount of information that flows from one side to the other. If you think about it, we don't have a police and a sheriff record system. We have a shared record system. So one of the things that you learn early on is that, the guys committing crimes don't care about jurisdictional boundaries, okay? Not on their top 10 list of what they care about when they're doing burglaries or stealing things or whatever it is. We had to get out of the mindset that this whole jurisdiction thing was really just something that we had to deal with, but we could make it better. And we broke down those barriers and we said, we're going to share everything. And if you have an idea how we could do better, bring it to the table. And since that time, we've added probably a dozen to 15, 16 different new things that we didn't start out with, but the direction was set on where we needed to go. And we started there, and we've tried to improve that every year.
Did it work even better than you thought it was going to be?
It absolutely did. Here's the thing. When you have a police chief and you have a sheriff, they have a little bit of independence, right? They're kind of the person that's going to decide what happens in that agency. They really don't need to talk to anybody else. They get to decide. When you do co-location to the level that we do, you have to talk to your partner. And that is the chief has to talk to the sheriff and the sheriff has to talk to the chief, because I could do something in the 911 center that might negatively impact his officers. We don't want that to happen. So that line of communication is always open. And we are talking about mirroring policies together. So a lot of our policies look exactly the same. Our training looks pretty much exactly the same. And we share all of those different services or programs or equipment, whatever it might be. It's shared to the good of the whole.
So let's go to 1990 to 2025. You're in the law enforcement center, shared services. How much bigger is your department since 1990? How much bigger is the City of Kearney's department since 1990?
For us, we're both we probably both have doubled in size from what we were, maybe just a little bit more than what we were back in 1990. So it's been a rather large increase in just with population growth, with all the different crimes there are and the specialization. We specialize now in a lot of things that we did not back then. An example of that would be crime analyst. So we knew what the crimes kind of were doing. We were small enough to know where we needed to pay attention. Now with the combined crimes, we have a joint shared crime analyst. And she tells us where we need to be paying attention. She tells us what trends that are going on. We have a co-responder, a mental health co-responder. That licensed mental health professional is riding with both officers and deputies to go out and inject themselves with us into situations where people are contemplating suicide, where someone's having a really bad day and they're very depressed, and we know that they need to talk to somebody because we know that they're having mental health issues. So we see new things that happen to address ever-changing needs of the people that we serve. And we've been fortunate because of this co-location. Those two projects I just talked about are split on cost. So there's one person, but both sides pay half of that. And so instead of having a co-responder for the county and a co-responder for the city and a crime analyst for the county, we find a lot of value and savings, and not just the money side, but the information sharing and the consistency that we can provide to the public.
So how much money, let's go to the money because people always want to know about money. How much money do you think it saves Buffalo County and the City of Kearney every single year to have co-location?
When we very first started, they went back and tried tracking those numbers, but what the administration of both sides, both the city administration, county administration, have come up with was about $32 million is what it has saved. It's projected that somewhere around $60 million has the potential of being saved if the community continues to grow and the county continues to grow as it has. We're going to see a large amount of savings. And again, we're always looking for ways that if we do add somebody on the support services side, we look to see how that partnership can work so that we don't end up duplicating those services. People's where your money's at in a budget. So the more you can do to reduce the number of people that it takes to do things, the better it's going to be for the people that are paying the bills.
And that makes a lot of sense. So, you talk about growth, and you've doubled in size since 1990. this building hasn't gotten any bigger, right? You're in an old power plant building. It's what year was this thing built? 40s?
1948.
1948. You're out of room. And so as you leave office, you're probably getting ready for one of the biggest political fights you've had since 1990, and that is to build a new law enforcement center. How important is a new law enforcement center, and why is it needed in Buffalo County and the city of Kearney?
To me, it's very important. I've seen us go from 2 law enforcement agencies and 2 separate buildings. I was around for 12 years of that. Not to say that we didn't get along. We always have gotten along, but we didn't have the relationships then in 2 different buildings that we have now. We didn't have any of the shared services that we had. We had 2 911 centers. We had 2 records departments. We had 2 evidence rooms. We had 2 impound lots. We had about 2 of every support service that a law enforcement agency needs to be a law enforcement agency and do their job. What happened, though, is we saw that the needs increased, but not necessarily the number of people needed to do that particular service. So as we move to the future, it's going to really, I believe, be imperative to keep the Kearney Police Department and the Buffalo County Sheriff's Office together, continuing to share every resource that we can. And as we say, and I truly believe this in my heart, we are better together. We are better together. And that's not just some cliche. That's how we live our lives, and that's how we do our jobs with these 2 agencies every single day. Most of the people in this building that are currently working do not know anything other than this. They were never in when the Kearney Police Department was at City Hall and when the Buffalo County Sheriff's Office was at the courthouse.
Let's say a constituent comes up to you and says, you're bluffing. If this doesn't pass, there's no way you're not going to co-locate together. What would you say to that?
I'd say, you know what? You're probably right. You're probably right. We're probably not going to not co-locate and try to make things work, even if they are cramped. But as you know, or you might be aware, we got a building across the street that the county owns that we had to move our detectives to. And we had to move our court services division over there across the street because there was not enough room in this building. That's not an optimal situation. We are no longer under one roof. Co-location works best when all of us see each other every single day. And that, we've lost a little bit of that because we had to move people out because they were too crowded in this building to really do a good job. To be fair to the people we served, it was not fair to have all these detectives and investigators in one area when one could hear the conversation of somebody else. It provided no privacy of any kind. We worked with the council, city council, and the county board came up with the building across the street. Does it work? Yes, it works, and it's a good space for them. Does it continue to work as we move to the future? Not near as well as it will if we can have a building that we're all under one roof. And co-location is important enough that we're not going to give up on it. And if this doesn't go this time, we're going to come up with a new plan and figure out how do we make this work? How can this go? So I would say that to say that if it doesn't pass, co-location is going to just fall apart. Co-location is a lot more solid than that. What we're saying is it will be more difficult. We will be less effective. And it gives an opportunity for our funding agencies to start saying, yeah, we think it's a great thing, but you know what? We need more space. Maybe we need to just move the county out and the city owns this building. All of those conversations become relative. If we have a facility that we can all be in together, that's not something we even talk about.
I mean, you're talking about efficiencies, and efficiencies save money in the long run. I know people are going to see a $72 million price tag and go, that's a lot of money, my property tax. If your neighbor comes up to you and goes, you tell me why I should vote for this at $72 million, what would you tell your neighbor?
I would tell any of my friends or my neighbor would say, the reason this is so important, and yes, it is a lot of money, and we're fully aware of what the cost of this facility is, but this facility has been designed to meet the needs of the Buffalo County Sheriff's Office and the Kearney Police Department for a minimum into the future of the next 35 years. So if you look at that investment and you spread that investment out over a 35-year period and you're not Band-Aiding or you're trying to add on or you're trying to move them out of a building, then I believe that investment is worth making, and I believe that it ensures that the Kearney Police Department and the Buffalo County Sheriff's Office will continue to be in the same building together, doing business the way we are today, only better in the future. And so, I'm on my last round of law enforcement. All right, so it might have been easier for me to say, you know what, new building's kind of nice, but I'm out of here in 18 months. So good luck, guys. This is way too important for that. This is so important that I am out there, I'm going to be out there, and I'm going to continue to champion that we need this law enforcement center so that we can continue to do the great things that the Kearney Police Department and the Buffalo County Sheriff's Office have done together, whether it's community outreach when we're shoulder to shoulder out there at some event that we've got the public at, whether out with kids fishing together. All of those things happen because of relationships. When you're in two buildings, it's not the same. You know each other, you're neighbors, but when you're in one place, you're more like family. You're talking, you know each other, you know who their spouses are, who their kids are. You have a relationship, and that relationship matters, and that relationship makes great things happen.
Well, I think what people may not understand, and when you're talking about jurisdiction, right, is that if you need help in Ravenna, Elm Creek, and you need help, the Kearney Police Department can come outside the jurisdiction to help. That's right?
They do. They do on a regular basis. We come into town to help them when they're having a really busy night on a weekend. We'll slip in and help them with calls. Here's something else that after you do law enforcement like almost 50 years, one thing you find out really quickly is people really don't care what color your uniform is. They need a law enforcement officer. So if that call's in Buffalo County, but we're not close enough to respond, the Kearney Police Department is going to get out there, take care of business on that call. We'll get there as we can. We'll finish up the call with them, working that thing together. And the same thing goes with coming into town. They get calls stacked up, and you got people waiting for an officer to show up. One of my deputies can come in, help them get that call done, take care of the needs of that particular caller, and do that. And we do it every single day. Kearney Police Department's been 35, 40 miles from Kearney to help us on a call. And it's all about the safety. And again, it goes back to the relationships. We just had a Lifesaver Award that we presented. Two of the dispatchers that helped on a CPR call, one deputy and one Kearney police officer. We got a 911 call from the westbound rest area that a 24-year-old was having difficulty breathing. The dispatchers were on the phone doing what they call telecommunicator CPR. So this 24-year-old is with his parents. He had a medical condition that caused him to not stop breathing at times. So the dispatchers are doing CPR over the phone with the parents. I have like 4 deputies out, but only one close, but we're close to the city of Kearney. So the officer that heard the call on the radio because of our joint radio system, our shared radio system, he hears the call go out. He hears that I only have one person close. He automatically heads to that call. So I got a Kearney police officer and a Buffalo County Sheriff's Office deputy doing CPR on this person, and it just happened that they were there to look out for each other. That's because when they're out and they're working, they're listening to those calls. They're listening to see when we might need help. We're listening to see when they might need help. And it goes not just for law enforcement. There are times that our paramedics are out on a scene and they go with 2 people. Well, if you're doing CPR, it generally takes 2 people to do that pretty well. Who's driving the ambulance? The answer is either a deputy sheriff or a Kearney police officer, because we also have that relationship with our EMS people that they know that if they need to do CPR in the back, we're going to drive the ambulance for them and get them into the hospital as quickly as we can.
What I hear you saying is really it's about a culture, and there's a shared culture between the 2 departments, but you also want to bring in more people that share that culture and a lot of people don't like to talk about this, but a new law enforcement center would be a great recruiting tool too, right? I mean, that attracts people who want to come to a great community, great county, and go, oh, I've got the tools and everything to be successful in my job.
It is a wonderful recruiting tool because it shows that a community is invested in their law enforcement when they see a facility, when they see the amount of training we can do in-house, when we have all of those things available that matters to these young officers. And we still have a hiring and retention crisis going on in law enforcement in the state of Nebraska. It's better than it was, but we're still at the crisis level where we have sheriff's offices and police departments that are at half of their authorized strength, and there are no applications in the drawer. They don't have a single application, and they don't know what they're going to do to hire people. We have been fully staffed most of the time since this all started pre-COVID or right after the COVID hit in 2020. We saw a real drop-off, and we struggled for a while as well getting people here, finding people who wanted to do this job. But co-location and the training that we're able to do together helped us get through that and kept us fully staffed most of the time. And so it's a huge recruitment tool. It's a huge retention tool to keep the officers here knowing that they've got what they need to be safe, to do their job, and get the training they need to do that.
We call it pillars of progress. I think we can call you pillar of stability because you look from 1990 to today, it's been pretty darn stable. And congratulations. I mean, that's amazing to do something 50 years and to one last campaign, not for sheriff, but to get this thing passed for you, right?
That's exactly right. I said, this will be my last election. That's the one we do for this building. And I'm hoping that with this last election, that it ends up being the nine I've had when I ran for sheriff, and that is that we pass this and that we get this building and facility in place for our law enforcement officers in Kearney and Buffalo County.
Sheriff Miller, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. I've enjoyed it. You've taken me down a little bit of memory lane here, and so it's been wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.